Again, this is a review of the 2018 Nebraska Emergency Managers Handbook. And we'll go ahead and get started. The handbook, it doesn't promise that there's a perfect response system, but it can help improve the system that you have. Local and state assets are vulnerable to disasters and may become overwhelmed. Governments can only attempt to make every reasonable effort to respond based on the situation. Information and resources available at the time of and following the disaster.
Good thing to remember is that this is just a reference tool. Your LEOP and all other emergency plans in your county or local levels take precedent over the EM handbook.
The handbook originated, it originated as a group effort between local EMs and NEMA staff. It provides guidance and insight to the role of the local emergency manager. So the way that the handbook came about, local EMs and emergency management came together. They wanted to provide some guidance for the local EMs, just give them a bigger picture of what their job entails and with the job of emergency management. So the handbook, it can be a valuable resource, not just for local emergency managers, but for anyone that's involved in emergency management. It's designed to increase awareness of how emergency management professionals, like I said, fit into the big picture.
If at any time you have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat feature, either to the group or privately, and we'll answer them, or get our attention somehow, and we can answer questions as we go along as well.
So there have been a number of revisions to the handbook throughout the years. In this revision, basically, we reduced the handbook from 25 to 21 chapters this year. There were some chapters that we actually combined. There were some chapters that we may have just determined were no longer needed. And a lot of the changes revolved around language that needed to be updated and changed so that the handbook would be applicable to city and village jurisdictions as well as tribal jurisdictions. So that kind of touches on the main changes that we've had, that we made this year. Also, a big change that I can remember in the handbook was really a lot of updating on NEMA and our organization, which there have been several changes from the last time the handbook was revised. So Chapter 1 of the handbook lays out the foundation of emergency management. It explains the concept of a comprehensive emergency management program and the 4 phases of emergency management. It also has a short introduction on the National Incident Management System. So in Chapter 1, the first phase of emergency management is preparedness, and Chapter 1 goes into preparedness. It covers activities related to planning, exercise, and training based on hazard and vulnerability assessments. Response covers actions taken shortly, before, during, and after a disaster to save lives and minimize damage. These would include actions such as shelter operations, initiating search and rescue, and other protective measures. It also goes into recovery. After the immediate threat to life and property has passed, the recovery phase begins with activities like cleanup, your debris removal, repair, and restoration. Mitigation is the process of reducing the effects of the next disaster while keeping in mind the lessons of the past. Floodplain management, zoning, codes and standards, fire prevention, and hazard mitigation grant programs results in a more resilient community. So NIMS was developed to improve the nation's capability to respond to major emergencies and disasters. Chapter 2, the emergency manager as designated by law, local ordinances, resolutions, or by job description is responsible. The emergency manager is responsible for the components of the emergency management program in the jurisdiction. The EM is the jurisdiction's primary point of contact and liaison with state and federal emergency management agency personnel. The EM has two principal roles, that is coordination and planning. Coordination between local agencies and organizations and the state and federal agencies in a disaster is a pivotal responsibility and typically falls on them. Planning and engaging in all interested and responsible parties is essential for an effective emergency management program. In Chapter 3, we're going to get into some concepts and probable activities for supporting emergency operations. The principal executive officer, whether it's the mayor, the county board chair, or the chair of the village board, bears the direct and ultimate responsibility for how well the jurisdiction prevents, prepares for, responds to, survives, and recovers from an emergency or disaster. The emergency manager provides assistance and advises the principal executive officer to ensure that proper emergency actions like planning, response, recovery, mitigation are taken to provide the care and support for those citizens affected in the jurisdiction. So Chapter 4 is going to talk about our local government and the structure, how it's structured in Nebraska. So all disasters start and end locally. We hear that over and over again. Though it's local emergency management agency, county government develops and maintains an ongoing, and through its emergency management agency and program, it maintains an ongoing program of mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Emergency managers work with other departments, the private sector, and volunteer organizations to develop plans and enhance response capabilities for hazards that pose a threat to your jurisdiction. By state statute, the principal executive official is charged with taking immediate steps to warn and evacuate citizens, alleviate suffering, and to protect life and property. In addition, local authorities are responsible for conducting the initial damage assessment and notifying the appropriate state agencies. It's always urged to declare a local disaster in any situation that may have a significant impact socially or economically on the citizens within your jurisdiction when the situations threaten to exhaust or overwhelm local resources, such as personnel, equipment, materials, or money. Provisions for a declaration are covered in the local emergency operations plan. In Annex A, Attachment 3, it would have a sample of an emergency of an emergency disaster declaration in the LEOP. The Nebraska Emergency Management Agency is part of the Nebraska Military Department, along with the Nebraska Army and Air National Guard. The State Adjutant General serves as Director of the Emergency Management Agency. An Assistant Director administers and coordinates day-to-day operations. FEMA supports and works with state and local jurisdictions in all phases of emergency management. FEMA and other agencies within the Department of Homeland Security act as partners to state and local governments in achieving a realistic state of preparedness and an increased capability to respond to and recover from all types of emergencies and disasters. So Chapter 7 will give us a better picture of how the state and federal jurisdictions are going to interact with FEMA at the federal level. An emergency is defined as any occasion or instance for which, in the determination of the President, federal assistance is needed to supplement state and local efforts and capabilities to save lives and to protect property and public health and safety, or lessen or avert the threat of a catastrophe in any part of the United States. So Chapter 7 is going to get into the types of federal declarations that can occur. First one is emergency assistance. These are types of emergency assistance which is limited in scope and specialized to meet a specific need and limited to actions required to save lives and protect property. So these are just a few examples, like providing mass care, sheltering operations, search and rescue, providing public information, things like that. Again, in types of federal declarations, you can have a disaster declaration. A major disaster is defined as any natural catastrophe, or regardless of cause, any fire, flood, or explosion in any part of the United States, which in the determination of the President causes damage or sufficient severity and magnitude to warrant major disaster assistance under this chapter to supplement the efforts and available resources of states, local governments, and disaster relief organizations in relieving the damage, loss, hardship, or suffering caused thereby.
It's important on the disaster declaration as well that it's from the end of the occurrence. Obviously, we at NEMA have the amount of days, which is 30 days to submit paperwork to the President or to FEMA for a federal declaration, which currently we're under the gun right now for the June storms and what hits the northeast part of the state. So just a hint, if you have any damages that haven't been reported from the June storms, let us know. Let Molly and Donnie know in the recovery section. So we're borderline whether or not we're going to have enough estimated damage in the state to get the federal declaration out of that.
So assistance under a federal declaration of disaster provides a wide range, which you can see on the slide. There's a wide range of assistance to individuals that can be provided, local and state jurisdictions as well, and certain nonprofit organizations. These are some examples that differentiate the types of individual as opposed to public assistance. They're broken out on the slide. That can, just historically, that can be confusing to the general public. Chapter 8 is going to talk about hazardous materials preparedness. Chemical disasters, they may go beyond environmental and jurisdictional boundaries, so it's imperative that all levels of government responsible for health and safety cooperate in preparing for potential disasters, especially as they're related to hazardous material events. We have the contact information for James Urshilla. He's our CERT coordinator, our State Emergency Response Commission. He also works with the local emergency planning committees throughout the state as well. The handbook describes the roles and responsibilities assumed by different agencies at different levels of government. So you can see here we have just a highlight of the some of the responsibilities and roles at the county, state, and federal levels of government. Local emergency planning committees are an effective way for local jurisdictions to coordinate their planning for hazardous materials incident. The handbook explains what an LEPC is and what its typical composition would look like in a local jurisdiction, who would be involved in that. And again, if you have any more questions like on starting an LEPC or specific questions of that, James Urshilla would be the one to contact at NEMA. So Chapter 9 is an example of, we actually combined a couple of chapters within the handbook, and this has been changed to the Joint Information System. Before, mainly focused on Joint Information Center, the JIC. And it explains the importance of a joint information system and how it is structured and how it's run. A JIC is part of the Joint Information System and is set up to monitor media coverage and to disseminate approved public information messages. The communications plan in your LEOP, in the Local Emergency Operations Plan, it should focus on plans for external warnings during times of severe weather, floods, tornadoes, and winter storms, and internal notification of first responder personnel and local officials as well. EOC staff and support persons should also be identified in how they're going to be communicated with in times of emergency. Should also be outlined in, it would be outlined in the Local Emergency Operations Plan. This chapter provides guidance to local emergency managers in supporting agencies on procedures for the timely and orderly evacuation of all or any part of an emergency management's jurisdiction when it is determined that such action is the most effective means available for protecting the life, security, and welfare of the population. So, and Chapter 11, a lot of what's in Chapter 11 is going to reiterate what's in the LEOP in Appendix Annex E, which covers evacuation. The Emergency Managers Training Program emphasizes certification. The Planning, Exercise, and Training Program addresses local capabilities, strengths, gaps, or shortfalls. The chapter also provides further details on the state's involvement with the Planning, Exercise, and Training Program. So Chapter 12 is going to go into all of that regarding planning, exercise, and training. Chapter 13 deals with HCEP. Nebraska adopted the HCEP program and structure to enhance the capacity of state and local governments to better respond to all hazards. HCEP offers consistent terminology and methodology applicable to exercises at all levels. So HCEP is going to give you guidance on the requirements for exercises and their development and conduct. So we have an entire chapter devoted to NIMS. Like I said before, there was an introduction in Chapter 1, but Chapter 14 will talk about, and NIMS provides a consistent nationwide approach for federal, state, and local governments to work effectively and efficiently together to prepare for, respond to, and recover from domestic incidents, regardless of cause, size, or complexity.
And NIMS in Nebraska is mandated per policy from the governor and how they respond to emergencies and disasters in the state.
Chapter 15 goes into grant management for the emergency manager. This chapter identifies grants that are typically administered by NEMA and requirements specified by either the grant or by NEMA. Chapter 16 is going to provide legal information basically on the authority behind the Nebraska Emergency Managers Act and how it relates to Nebraska, and the requirements that are stipulated by the Emergency Management Act. The last point, the last bullet on there talks about completely and thoroughly maintain LEOP, and if maintaining the LEOP is important, and it's important for the jurisdiction just to avoid legal issues that could arise following a disaster. Chapter 17 talks about COOP and COG, continuity of operations and continuity of government, and it highlights the distinctions between the two, COOP and COG, and what each is meant to do. Chapter 18 is going to give some guidance on pets and disasters. Providing for the care of animals in a disaster, we've just seen in past events, larger scale events that have occurred mainly in other states, but it requires a lot of planning and coordination, identifying the organizations and resources you'll need in an emergency will enhance your effectiveness when it comes to dealing with issues like this. Chapter 19 talks about voluntary organizations and volunteers active in disaster. One thing to point out in this chapter, there's an extensive list of organizations in Chapter 19 for emergency managers, and we like to provide that for the emergency managers to use as a reference. So it's always good to have your handbook around. We've seen a lot of volunteer activities in different events or incidents that have occurred in the state, and this can be a helpful resource.
As Patrick said, there were too many to really list out in here. The list for the most recent issue of the handbook was updated by Brent Curtis, who is now the Watch Center coordinator, but he still also handles our individual assistants and the VOADs. So if there's something that's not in Chapter 19 of your handbook, get a hold of Brent and we can get it updated or revisit that next time we go for an update to the handbook.
Chapter 20, this is going to, of course, challenges. There are many challenges, and it's hard to list everything, but this touches on a few common challenges that have been identified in the past, and it's going to pose several hypothetical problems with suggested solutions for emergency managers to consider. That can be helpful, just basically based on the experience of other emergency managers in the past and what they've dealt with in their jobs. Okay, the last chapter, Chapter 21. Chapter 21 is going to talk about professional associations and basically how they're an excellent resource for the exchange and sharing of information and ideas. Belonging to different associations, you know, it can help you meet other people that work either in emergency management or maybe in complementary fields that we may have to work with in times of disaster or an emergency. Basically we've listed a couple of organizations that are specific to emergency management, but certainly there's plenty of organizations that could be beneficial in professional development as well as just meeting other people that could be a resource maybe and help out in our profession as well. If you have any plans or if you have any questions at any time regards to your local plans, the LEOP, or even the handbook, that type of thing, we're here, and that's what we're here for. Also, does anybody have any questions regarding the content of the EM handbook? We've tried to get out to PET meetings and distribute the new revised LEOP. We've been doing that. I'm sorry, the handbook. But we have been getting it out. I have actually mailed out a few, so it is getting out there. It is available on our website as well.
If you'd like a copy of it, send any of us an email and we will mail one out to you. As Patrick said, we're either the planning unit staff are trying to take them out to the PET region meetings or other staff in the agency that are going out all across the state. We try to get them some to take out, so if you need a copy, let us know and we'll get it there or get it to you. Also, as a reminder, July 25th and 26th here in NEMA, we'll be hosting a LEOP workshop, which it'll give you a chance to come in, sit down with the planners. If your planner from your actual region will be here to help you work out any issues you have. But as of now, the 4 planners, as well as myself, should be here to assist you in getting them done. It'll start out with a little introductory slideshow just to kind of let you know what our expectations are during the time we're here. But we'll have computers available, so if you want to work on one of our computers in our Emergency Operations Center, you can bring in your own laptop. Whatever you need from us, that'll be the time you can do it. And it's not only just those 2 days. You can come in, give us a call, set up time to come down here, meet with us, or the planner runners like to travel once in a while, so they can come out and meet with you and help work on your LEOPs in your own office. But I know it's nice to get away from your phone and your desk so you're not constantly interrupted. Obviously, everybody has cell phones, so the cell phone can still interrupt you here, but that'll give you 2 days of good work time to come to Lincoln and do some work on your LEOP here. This presentation will be available as soon as we get the recorded message or the recorded webinar back. We will send it out to everybody that participated today. Hopefully I have everybody. We may just end up sending it out to all of the EMs throughout the state, along with the slides that we presented. The slides were just a kind of a condensed version of what each chapter was in the handbook. Just kind of wanted to give you an up-to-date of what changes were made in it. I don't foresee any significant changes being made again next year, because we just did one in 2015 or 16, and then this one, or 2017, excuse me, I'm looking at it right now, and then in 2018. So it'll probably be another maybe a year or two, unless there's significant changes that need to be made to it. But we just wanted to give you guys a heads up on what we've done to make the changes, and just remember that it's more of a reference tool to kind of help you or guide you down a path when you're not sure what to do. If nothing else, you can always give any of us a call here at NEMA in the planning unit, or any of the other units or sections here, and we can help you through it. So, if you don't have any further questions, Logan, any questions in the chat?
No, sir.
Well, we appreciate your time. Sorry it didn't go the full 2 hours, but everybody's time is important, so we wanted to just get through this as quickly and as pain-free as possible. So, with that, we'll end it now. Have a nice day.